Welcome everybody. We're just waiting for our quorum to fill up, which we don't quite yet have. And Jen, our CB1 assistant is not able to get in yet. So we're just hanging on for a few minutes for her, and then we will get started. So you can just take a moment to relax, enjoy this beautiful weather we're having. And then we'll get going. And just so you know, I don't understand, I've written the office about this budget response. Lucia, are you with us? He was here a minute ago. So we're going to begin with that resolution as soon as everybody's here. One, two, three, 4, 5. And Church Street did not make it onto this written agenda for reasons I don't understand, but they are with us as well tonight. And we are going to be visiting with them and introducing everyone to their new director.
Hi, Trisha and everyone. I'm on. Apologies for keeping you wait.
Good.
Alrighties.
Glad you made it.
I see that we officially started the recording, right? Okay, awesome.
Good. Yes, we don't have a quorum. And so I think what I'm going to do is move away from the remote learning, and we're going to start with Church Street, who isn't on the agenda, Jen, for some reason. Can you add them so that we have it logged?
Sure, okay. Oh, we have, apologies if I mispronounced your name, Paris or Paris. I moved you to a panelist, so you're able to unmute yourself if you wish.
So I want to introduce you all. Is Judy with us as well? I can't see the list.
I believe she's also there as well.
Okay, wonderful. So exciting news. As you know, we had Lisa Eklund Flores, after many, many years and starting her beautiful and cherished neighborhood school, Church Street School of Music and Art, decided to step down as head of it, making way for a new director. And Judy was in touch with us to let us know that they had found someone new, and with us tonight is that replacement, and his name is Peruz. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Partau?
Yes, yeah.
Wonderful. So welcome, and we're so happy to meet you, and welcome to our community and to this beautiful school. We're thrilled that you're at the helm of it, as I know everyone there is. And we look forward to being partners with you in your next iteration there.
Thank you so much. I love that word partner, because I give lots of credit to Dr. Eklund Flores for the many partnerships and relationships that she has built over the years, even in the short amount of time at my helm. I've definitely seen the fruits of her great work, and so glad to be welcomed by all of you this evening. I guess since I tapped into history, though, I'm delighted for the future for Church Street and any future partnerships as well. We've been talking to opera companies, dance companies, schools, PTAs, early education facilities, all about different types of partnerships and how we can present our world-class faculty and utilize them to accommodate any scopes of learning, performances, celebrations, culture. It's a very diverse and versatile team, and I'm really excited about this wonderful opportunity to work with a fantastic community. One of my first tastes of New York City was getting to play at the knitting factory, and the whole downtown scene. Is we've got a lot of heritage and culture in the downtown, and I'm really looking forward to Church Street being a beacon for that history and also the future, with the fantastic performance facility we have on White Street.
Wonderful. For those of you, those of us that don't know about your background, can you tell us a few things about yourself and where you came from and how you got here?
Sure. Born and raised in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. I'm sad to say I'm still a Philadelphia sports fan, so I apologize to anybody here that's a sports fan. But I have been a Brooklynite for about 20 years now, and I really liked I mean, what's not to love about Brooklyn? But I actually found that after being at the Brooklyn Music School for about 18 years, where they're pretty soon about to break ground on a $15 million expansion of 20,000 square feet of space, um, you know, I took a lot of pride in my team and the community that really rallied around this organization. But like, honestly, to see how people have rallied behind Dr. Eklund Flores, Lisa, and the team that she's put in place, and the families, it's really a fantastic thing. But just about me too. I really come from a teaching artist background first and foremost. So what a lot of Church Street resonates as far as its idea of experiential learning really resounded well with me, and my experience as a teaching artist, both in our outreach programs and also just even one-on-one lessons.
Mhm. Fantastic. Anyone
Thank
have
you.
any questions? No questions. Well, we're really happy to have you here. We hope that we are committed to sending out your events as we always have, and our blasts. We look forward to partnering with you on all of your events that you have coming up that we love coming to, and working together to help, also solve your challenges as you go. I mean, this has been a really challenging couple of years. And so we're always here for you if there's something that we can do. But
Yeah.
always,
De-
mhm.
yeah, definitely. Trisha, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
I was just gonna say, just please tell your friends all about Church Street and all the wonderful different, not just music, but also art. The art classes there are fantastic. The studios, it's really a marvel every day to come in and see what has been worked on the day before they're drying or hanging. And um, I would say just please get the word out. We would really appreciate it very much. Open invitation to everybody, not just on the community board, anybody listening, please. You could reach out to me, peruse@churchstreetschool.org. Open invitation to come take a tour. Twiggy Coffee's right around the corner. Would love to have anyone and everyone to visit Church Street that has an interest. But really appreciate this opportunity. Oh, and another shameless plug, we're going to be at Taste of South Street Seaport this Saturday. And also our Spooktacular is going to be on Sunday the 24th. You can find all that information on our social media or our website. But very grateful for this opportunity, and thank you so much for your warm welcome.
Well, it is very warm. We're really excited to work together, and please come back and visit us from time to time, and just to keep us up with everything that you're doing.
Well, will do. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you all very much. I do have to run, so have a great rest of your meeting, but thank you very much again.
Sure. Very nice meeting you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Wonderful. Moving right along, we do have our quorum here now, and my assistant just delivered my copy. Thank you. So Judith, once again, has written us a beautiful resolution and an aspirational resolution, but a beautiful resolution on the remote learning that she spoke about last meeting. Has everybody had enough time with that? Yes, no? Are there any discussions? People have anything that they want to bring up that they saw? Congratulations, concerns, ideas, feedback? Nothing? Am I not hearing anybody?
Hi, it's Darren. Good evening.
Hi, Dick.
Question on the therefore be it resolved, we're saying calls upon 5 times. Normally we don't do that. We say suggests, recommends, urges. What's the what are our thoughts on using call upon?
Judith, are you open to changing the language so it's not redundant and use another term? I mean, we could mix it up.
I mean, do we have to? I mean, it's fine the way it is. I think just I mean, normally you don't use the what's it, the preposition, right? We try to avoid that stuff. But I mean, just
We've used everything from strongly advises to demands to asks to
say requires.
you can't say required, but because they're not,
Right.
but you can use,
Is that, I mean, I think calls upon isn't as strong as urges or things like that. I mean, do we want to convey that, or do we want to say urges? That's the strongest word we can use, right?
I think urges is great. Judith, are you with us? I actually don't see her yet.
Okay, well, we can table that for when she returns, or
I thought she was in the meeting, so we might just want to put that aside till she comes back. Yeah, she's
Okay.
just.
That's it.
So thank you for that. Appreciate it. So those of you who haven't had time with it, we are going to, I'll move on to the other things we have to talk about. But if you have a chance to just look through it more thoroughly, if you haven't, and, see if you have any other questions or comments that we can add for her. I also want to, I'm just going to say quickly because it's on our agenda, high school admissions results updates. I don't have an update to what we discussed at the last meeting, which for our community was a disaster, as most of you'll remember. We only had one school resolve. One child got into Quest to Learn, which was on their list of 12, and they had been waitlisted. None of our other kids were admitted to any of the schools on their list of 12. We had a significant amount leave the city. We had a handful go to private school. We had 4 to 5 go to Richard Green. Out of all the ones that were assigned to urban assembly schools, Murray Bertram, Richard Green, Harvest Collegiate, all of the other schools that the parents had not chosen, none of them have opted to go to those schools except for the ones who went to Richard Green. So that update I have. We are obviously in touch with the Department of Education as to the massive failures of that process for our community, and are hoping to troubleshoot this for next year, even though for some families that won't be soon enough. We feel strongly as a community board that if they give you a choice of 12, you should be able to expect one of those 12. We passed our resolution asking the DOE to hold high school fairs so that parents and children could become familiar with some of the schools they feel comfortable assigning them to that they haven't chosen. And we will be continuing to advocate for a much better process going forward. So
Tricia, I'm sorry. I'm not getting a picture as to, you went through a couple of families that didn't get their choices. I'm
More
just
than
trying to get a picture. I'm trying to get a picture of the totality of your data. How many families do we know, did we hear from, and we're hearing from 15, 20 who did not get any of their 12 choices? I'm just trying to understand what you're.
So the data, sure, Bob, the data on the admissions we had at a meeting last spring. So the office has that data in terms of exactly which schools, how many kids at each school did not get their choices. We then passed a resolution with that data in it, and it fleshed out to about 20%. It might even have been 30% at some schools. I think it might have been, did not get.
So let me just say, I'm sorry. So 30%, 20% of the children who graduated, 8th graders who graduated, did not get any of their 12 choices.
Correct. Some got none at all. And then many were placed at schools they did not choose.
Right. None of their first 12 choices.
Correct. One got waived.
That's outrageous.
It's completely outrageous. It was the most careless, I mean, that's editorialized by your chair, but it was an incredibly careless process.
Well, I'll just editorialize. That's why I would never put remote learning in the hands of the DOE either. They just are digitally incompetent.
Well, I mean, if you listen to Judith talk about it, we discussed it today. And it's actually and I'll move on from this item, just to clear the line.
Thank you for that report. I just went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was a disaster for us, clearly. And a lot of the families we can no longer talk to about what really happened to them because they're gone, which is another thing that was a cautionary tale in that resolution we passed in the spring. It just will have fallout because, of course, these families have younger siblings and they're paying attention to how things are being handled and making decisions accordingly. So we haven't even begun to see the consequences of that decision. So, suffice it to say, we'll be in very close touch with the DOE in these fall months. I'm going to have it on every agenda. So I hope to have something more concrete to tell you all. I had hoped to really be able to have more specific information tonight about the path these families went on, but a lot disappeared. And it's hard, when it's the 8th grade counselor and then they don't get into high school, they're not in 8th grade anymore. So the 8th grade counselors then have to focus on their incoming communities. And it's very challenging once school begins to track. So we will be, like I said, keeping this on our agenda and hope to have a more concrete update in terms of process for everybody next month. And maybe another resolution. So that's that. And then let me just see if Judith is with us yet. She's not. All right, so we're going to move on. I want to introduce you guys to Mara Fitzgerald, who is from Community Board 2. She's been a great partner for me, working with Janine very closely in some of the joint resolutions that we've done together over the past several years, especially. And she is a parent at LMC and is experiencing, if your kids have been to LMC like mine have, is experiencing New Street at the moment. She has brought a resolution for our review. And I just want to say, Mar, we do have to, and if I wasn't totally clear, I want to apologize, but we do have to look at this resolution and then take the resolution out and do some diligence. So it's a resolution that we did want to see, but we can't pass it until I take it back to the office and we look at impact, even if it's only construction workers and security pop-ups. They wanted to see what we were advocating for before engaging in conversations. So our intention is to help move this resolution to passing, barring any extenuating circumstances. In terms of my research, there was nothing going on that street as of today that I've been able to find that would preclude us from closing this street and putting down some parameters for construction on that street. So I want to say that first of all. And leading up to this, we had an incident there last fall with construction, people compressing drywall right up against the sidewalk where children were walking with all of the dust of the drywall flying in their face. So clearly there needs to be something done, and we will, definitely be supporting you and all of the other parents at LMC. So if you want to introduce your resolution to us and yourself to our committee, and tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. Hi, can you guys hear me? I seem to be having some technical issues here.
I can hear.
Oh, great. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. We started at LMC at the beginning of the school year, and I mean, from the first day, we realized that there was a serious issue on New Street, the serious safety issue, the active vehicle barriers. I saw a child, I mean, almost get swallowed by it if the security guard hadn't grabbed him, and she grabbed him like midair. I can't even imagine what would have happened. And there are incidents like that every day. There's traffic, there's not actual construction happening on New Street. It seems that there are deliveries coming through a loading bay in the back of 60 Broad.
Got it.
So it's not actual construction on the block, like they're just using that back door, I guess, rather than using, the Broad Street entrance. But there are so many people. And there was a terrible incident where I didn't send you the video for this. It's horrible to watch, but one of the workers screamed at one of the kids, just started yelling at him and told him that he should die. There's a serious scarcity of space.
You say that
And-
again? I'm sorry. I think that needs a little more clarification because, and oh, by the way, this is Wendy, and I had a son who went to LMC.
Hi, Wendy. Yeah, there was a kid, and I don't know what the conflict was, what instigated the situation, but an adult male, I assume, human being, started screaming at a 10-year-old boy. And I mean, I'll send you guys the video so you can see it, but you can't even really hear what he's saying, but you do hear him saying you should die to a child. And that there was another incident, I don't know the exact details of, but there's been conflict. The scarcity of space has created conflict on that street. People milling around, people trying to get where they need to go. And of course, 700 children, who pour in and out of those buildings 3 times a day.
So it used to be, yeah, I would say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it used to be that there was usually the vice principal was down if the kids were out there. Is that how you have the video, or are there LMC administrators down there to find out who these people are?
Yes, there are, and that video has been sent to the first precinct. The bigger issue is if there weren't so much activity, it would be the conflict would be less likely. If the kids had exclusive access to the street in those, 3-hour blocks for arrival, lunch, and dismissal, then there really wouldn't be an issue, with these workers or anybody else really, or the danger of the AVBs going up and down because they're terrifying.
And dangerous.
And they're highly dangerous, especially for the kids.
Well, that's alarming that someone actually spoke to them. Is that was that delivery? Who was the person who was abusive?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. I know that our principal sent the video to the precinct.
Okay. If you can send us
I will.
the contact at the precinct and the video, that would be great. And then we are going to also loop in the DOT, which we have to do, and go to the next step with this. It seems like a slam dunk.
I hope so.
Having been a parent there, I'm very familiar with the lack of traffic coming in and out and the fact that they are all scheduled deliveries. I don't know, the only thing that gets complicated with that is if it's a restaurant or something that has a time sensitive, element to their delivery. We'll just have to look into that in terms of its impact. We've been able to get around that in the past. But I think that you aren't asking for a full day closure. And I think that, we will do diligence to do the best we can with this. And certainly all those supporting incidences will really help. And if there are 311 calls that have been made, I know it sounds, 311 to me always sounds ridiculous to be talking about. I'm sorry, but I've never gotten much in terms of help from there, but I am now understanding how important it is to log those calls because it's an amount of calls you make that tip the scales in terms of initiatives like this. So if you can get us any information on that as well, I think that would be super helpful. And then we will take this and put it back on our agenda for next month with the intention of passing it. Does anybody have any other questions for Mar or comments about this?
We're just asking for the street to be closed to anyone but school, school population during certain hours. That's the ask.
Vehicles, not
Okay.
walking traffic. I mean, there's very little foot traffic there anyway, but some people do walk up New Street to Exchange Place because it's less busy than Broadway,
Right.
which is fine. But you've got the charter school that generally comes in from the north. And then you've got LMC that comes generally in from the south. And Mara's right. You've got, 700 or 800 kids arriving. So it's really contraindicated to have, trucks going over these AVB things, delivering it at that exact time. And we had we had a demolition happening in one of those buildings at drop off. It was toxic. And there was no organization clearly between the happenings on that street and the DOE. And as often happens when they build schools in office buildings, those things fall through the cracks. And so there have to be some, we were able to get somewhere and forbid those construction projects at that time. They had to get permission eventually to do that, if you guys recall. But now we have deliveries causing problems. And I think at this point, it's very little to ask to close for these small blocks of time. And again, unless it's a restaurant, and then we'll just have to figure it out.
And are the blocks of time just morning and afternoon, or is it also lunch? Because they have out lunch.
It's Mara's asking for 11:30 to 12:30. 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., 11:30 to 12:30 midday, and 2:15 to 3:30 for dismissal.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, great. Just recapping next steps. Mara's going to get that information to me. I'm going to pass it to the office. We're going to reach out to the DOT. We're going to do some diligence about who's delivering when on New Street. And we're going to come back next month to hopefully pass this.
Thank you all so much. And let me know if there's anything else you need from me.
Thanks so much for coming, Mar.
Have a good night.
Doing
I'm
this.
hopping over to the CB2 schools and ed meeting now. I have my own meeting that I'm late for. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right,
Good
take care. All right, Judith is here. Judith, do you want to introduce your resolution to us? And what we did get some feedback. Darren, would you be willing to repeat on the feedback you had for Judith?
Yes, hi. Good evening, Judith. The calls upon down at the bottom there, the five of them. Do we typically want to say calls upon? We want to say mix it up, maybe say recommends or urges.
Oh, that's fine. I'm happy to tweak that. Um, no problem.
Okay, or yeah, it's a minor thing there.
I can tweak that. Oh, so I mean this I think, you know, kind of has everything we talked about last time. What I tried to do was, you know, what I was concerned about in writing this resolution was, would it look like we were encouraging remote learning? Because I wanted to discourage remote learning. So what I tried to do was discourage remote learning, but at the same time encourage it if people were quarantined. So I hope it does that. Um, and that I don't know that I have a lot more to say than that, but you know, happy didn't really get any suggestions over the course of the week. I don't know if Trisha did either. So I just tried to incorporate the suggestions from last time, and I think, and at the last full board meeting, Andrew had some comments for Gail Brewer, and I incorporated those. I don't really have a good sense of kind of like, you know, what's going on in the schools beyond the numbers that are in the resolution. Like, I just haven't heard a lot of stories, quite frankly. You know, I saw that I mentioned last time PS 79 had closed down in total, but I think it's back now. The rules were changed a little bit, which I thought about addressing here, in terms of full classroom closures, and like they changed the rules as of September 27th. I think if you're masked and at least 3 feet apart from the infected person, like maybe you don't have to quarantine anymore, which I was reading an article, the teachers were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep track of that? So I kind of stayed away from that too, just because it seemed like a minefield as well. I don't know if there's going to be less like full classroom closures because of that change, but again, there still seems like there are a lot based on the numbers. So I decided not to wade into that minefield and just keep it as, look, there's the potential for kids being out for a long period of time, you know, 10 days, and then it's potentially, if they get exposed again, it could be another 10 days. So it's a lot of time for kids to be out yet again. That, I think that covers it from my end.
The only feedback I had as I looked at this towards the end of the day is, I think for me, what was really powerful was that we were asked to be patient with the DOE. We were sold that the hybrid plan they had would be adequate in helping our kids stay at level. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I also feel as though illustrating the failures and the shortcomings of what they came up with previously, you know, most prominently is the fact that, you know, I can only speak for the 4 schools that I had intimate experience with. They were in school from 8:30 until 1 p.m. And I think I've told you all in here, my daughter's Algebra 2 and trig teacher said, we will not be getting to trig. I'm only teaching her 3 sections a week instead of 4. So if your kid is on a math track for college, you're going to have to figure that out. And I assume it didn't happen everywhere. We would have heard more about it, maybe. But to me, once I heard that and we were so deep into it that it couldn't be reversed, that was the moment for me where I felt this resolution going into this year was so essential, because that isn't happening across the country. And there are classes where there's a camera on the teacher's desk and they're teaching and they're taping it. Not only can they see it live, they can see it later if they're sick. And I still have not received an acceptable explanation of why we can't do this here. It would not show the students. I know it's a teachers union contract potential violation, but under these extenuating circumstances, I think this is at least worth a serious exploration. And this data that Judith brought today, I had gone looking for it, and when she sent it, this is a significant number. You know, one can envision looking at this, that we could be looking at more than just partial closures. So that's my 2 cents on this topic. And I don't know if anyone agrees that with adding that whereas, illustrating the fact that, you know, our children just, we were not having the same experience as many schools across this country, which is very concerning in the long run. And so if this is going to be something, especially that's going to be with us for a while, we need this not to be an aspirational resolution and a realistic one.
Yeah, Trisha, I agree with you 100% that there's, if your school has the bad luck of getting shut down, you're really in a bad way.
Really
You
in a
know,
bad way.
You're really in a bad way. And I don't know if you guys saw the article today in the New York Times about science-minded parents are putting these CO2, carbon dioxide detectors in their kids' backpacks and cargo pant pockets and things like that, because it indicates how often the air is turning over, you know, how much exhaling is happening in the classroom. And
Wow.
they're saying that nationwide, you know, there's just wide discrepancies, even though all these classrooms are supposed to be ventilated. You know, some of it is just mechanical failure. Some it's the teacher closes a door that's not supposed to be closed or forgets to open a window. But, you know, you could get some really bad luck really fast from these indications. If one kid has COVID and the teacher closes the door, you know, there's things like that. So I think that if you don't have the ability, and I'm with everyone else, I do not want to go remote again at all. I mean, I don't even like community board meetings remote, but like I'm willing to do it for health reasons. It's not worth COVID. So, you know, I think we need to be, you know, very vigilant about saying, you know, why does New York City, when we, oh, by the have the best tech companies in the world located here, why can't we agree to record lessons, or at least send people to, you know, another, if it's not your teacher, at least it's a best practice so you can keep up with your studies. Maybe that's the alternative. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, live teaching was so underrated during this pandemic. It should be making every teacher feel like the rock star they are. It is so important. And when you got to see the fallout of children being delivered lessons in written form, it only magnified that. And to cut back on that this year, instead of expanding it with the hoping and wishing and praying that we're not going to have school closures along the lines we did last year, I think is reckless. And I think it's, I don't even know what, in terms of teaching, I don't even know what the teachers are expected to do for their kids who are home when there's school closures. It requires them to come up with a different way of delivering the lesson, which they had to do during the hybrid learning, which is why we were only in school 3 hours a day. So I think it's unfair to everyone. And you're right in that we do have technology available to us. And there are ways to keep children safe from cameras. And like I said, if I hadn't spoken with private schools across this country and learned how they did it, it wasn't the class size. That the camera was only on the teacher, not the children. And so they were able to not have to deliver their classes 2 different ways. So for me, unless I can hear a really good explanation and that, you know, forced by a resolution from the teachers union, why this can't happen, I definitely think this is on the right track.
So,
Anyone else?
I mean, I don't know how you'd have a camera only on a teacher. I don't stand at the front of my room like it's a like it's a concert and talk for 50 minutes and then walk out of the room. I move around the room. I ask kids to do things. They would do it with partners at tables. We share out after X period of time. It's not an old school model of teaching where I stand and like bellow forth about whatever and you videotape me and then I'm done.
Understood. But
Hopefully no one's doing that.
hear
That's
you.
like awful teaching. If that's what's happening in the private schools you were talking to, you should thank your lucky stars your kids aren't in those schools, because that would be a terrible experience for a kid to have.
I should have said, Jeff, they weren't sitting at the front of the class. The camera was there, but you have sound and you have teaching. It's never going to be the same. If we can't photograph the students, we can't photograph the students. That might be a harder thing to get past. But to feel as though they're in that classroom, I think is the spirit of this resolution. And so if it's that when the teacher is stepped away, that they can hear the lesson being done, they can see the board, they can feel like they're in the classroom, in addition to getting, however they plan on delivering these lessons, which we don't know. None of our schools have closed, so we don't know. But there has to be a plan for how they're delivering them without remote learning, I would assume. And I would think in addition to that, having this live experience, even if not perfect, would be better than not. And at least that's how I'm interpreting it, Judith. You can let me know.
No, I agree. I mean, it's obviously not the same as being in person, but it's doing the best to get as close to that as possible. And, obviously, the teacher's not moving around the camera while the teacher's moving around the room. So might there be, periods during the class where, like you said, teacher's out of the picture, but the board is visible, or just that the students are at least hearing what's going on and can participate. I mean, to me, I would hope they would be able to participate as well if possible. But again, like, this is not a perfect solution. It's just a lot better than any alternative.
So for me, while I have the floor, the issues I have with the resolution are the whereas that parallels it to restaurants and bars. To me, feels not. I won't describe what it feels like to me, other than restaurants and bars when they reopened at all were reopened outdoors at greatly reduced numbers. Many restaurants were destroyed by COVID. So it seems to paint this picture that somehow restaurants and bars just kind of went along while the schools couldn't even bother to do anything for students. So that to me feels like, honestly, like a disingenuous whereas. And also, so does the one that talks about there was 2 hours of enrichment type classes. I don't know what schools your kids were at. The school that I worked at had 4 hours of straight classes in the morning plus 2 more in the afternoon for kids on routine different days. So that to me also feels disingenuous. It wasn't like kids were getting 2 hours of instruction a day. They were getting, at many schools, a half an hour per class times 6 classes a day, or 3 hours of instruction. And we're also trying to limit, this is written as though we could just not think about the mental health of students. Spending 6 hours a day on a computer is also not good for students' mental health. And so that was something people talked about in those days. We were given guidelines by the DOE, and there were no school that was following the guidelines was giving 2 hours of instruction a day, or 2 days a week.
So yeah, no, that's a good point. What I meant to say is 2 hours of in person, 1 or 2 days a week, which was my experience with 3 kids at three different high schools. So I need to change that.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's right. I need to tweak that. I don't agree with the bars, restaurants, and liquor stores. First of all, liquor stores were open the entire time, even when every single retail store was closed. Liquor stores were open. But, to me, it just shows like a failure of priorities. And I'm sorry, but that's what I think. I think, I understand it's not that I don't think that liquor stores, bars, and restaurants should remain open. I think people need to work, and people, need services. And, but I think, and I think Wendy pointed this out last time, school should have been the last venue closed and the first venue open. Like, it just seemed to me a failure of priorities. And that I do think should stay in there.
So I guess I just fundamentally disagree. They should have been the last to close and the first to reopen. They waited too long to close them, and over 60 or 70 DOE staff died because of that. and restaurants were also so grocery stores were also open. They're not being mentioned. I feel like this whereas is all about shock value. The liquor stores and bars were open. A liquor store you walked into, you bought something, you walked out of it. Bars were carry in, carry out. It's written as though somehow everything went along smoothly except schools. And I really object to that. I mean, I'm not probably going to vote for this resolution anyway, but I'm just saying, or maybe I have to recuse myself anyway. But while I'm at it, I also think there's so many be it resolves that are just not possible. Like this idea, I mean, I think what you guys don't get not being in the classroom is this is just an awful year. This is the worst. This is like, it's draining. The kids are drained. Like people aren't addressing that. It's like as though if we just go back to school, everything's going to be better. The kids are completely scarred and traumatized by their year. The rate of kids offering ideas in class is awful, incredibly low. Every staff member I work with is just completely demoralized. This is like a hellish year so far. And you're asking to create, and we're just trying to survive and get through a year. And I recognize the problem brewing, which is there needs to be some system for kids if they're sent home, but also think about teachers. At our school, we had a teacher who had to quarantine. And that's even more challenging because now you've got an adult out of the building who's supposed to be in rooms with kids working. So someone has to cover that. Plus that adult is at home quarantined, possibly sick and trying to do these things that we're asking of them. I just think that there's a real lack of understanding of just how horrifying this year has been for people. And it's not as though if we just go live again, it's all going to be better. I'm telling you from a perspective of a teacher, this is a very, very rough year. And the mental health of teachers is at a breaking point like I've never seen in 30 plus years of teaching. And you're asking the DOE to step in and train all of us to somehow give synchronous remote learning, require it, train us to do it, videotape our classes. I mean, these asks are just, they're unbelievable to me as someone who's in the classroom every day doing it. Like, I understand where it's coming from and it's not meant to be. I know that you're not meaning to do these things, but like, I just don't think you're understanding like the affect of students in the building right now. They're just like completely shell-shocked and traumatized by their year off. Most kids don't raise their hand ever. You have to like work so hard to get a kid to raise their hand. It wasn't always like that before. I don't know. I'm just kind of giving you a perspective from someone doing it. I don't know what you expect the DOE to do to train us to provide all this simultaneous instruction while we're also trying to deal with the affect of students who are completely traumatized in the school building. It's just so much. It's just so much. Just saying that. Sorry.
Jeff, this is Wendy, and I want to acknowledge that I hear that mental health component and I witness it with my own, kids, whether, and I hear that at all different levels. I think the difficulty is that, sadly, and some kids just, if you're too, broken or, too upset or too depressed, you can't learn at all. But the expectation from, when you go to college or if you, staying on track and that type of thing. And you want your kids to be able to, if God forbid you have the bad luck that your school gets turned down. I'm not saying that you in the classroom as a teacher has to be the way to do it, but I do think the DOE, and that is not your job, that's the DOE's job, is to say, hey, listen, if we want our kids to take algebra one year or trigonometry or whatever the subject matter is, there's someplace to go. If you have the bad luck of your school getting turned down, if the kid still wants to be on a college track, or maybe there's other tracks. I don't know other things, but we also know that the AP test is still coming, or whatever that is, it's still coming. And so parents are going to step in and do what we need to do, but that's not fair to people who don't have resources. And I'm just saying that the DOE can think about this in a bigger way. And I agree, it's not up to you as a classroom teacher doing the best you can to solve this problem, but something has to be done.
I agree with that, but this resolution is not doing that. This resolution is fully putting it on the DOE to train teachers to do all these things when we're already at a breaking point. It's like, I don't have the solution, and I hear what you're saying. And I'm loath to even speak about this because I'm just so like, it was hard to even come to this meeting because I'm just spent, totally spent. Everyone's spent. Everyone's completely depressed. It's just friggin' awful being a teacher right now and being a student right now. And I'm just concerned there's this kind of mindset that I'm hearing in this committee, and I'm hearing at my kids' soccer games from the parents there, of parents who just aren't getting that people are broken and are just like, I want more and more and more. And my kid's not going to be prepared. My kid's going to fall behind in society because of school. And it's just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's people are doing the best they can. And I think the DOE should be coming up with a system where there's some plan for what happens from a centralized location of supporting kids when they're out. It's not sustainable. I have 170, 60 students a day. And it's like, I'm supposed to tailor make lessons for 12 of them if they get quarantined, while grading all that work and writing lessons for the ones that aren't. It's impossible. Like, basically, my job cannot be done in anywhere near an 8-hour day. So the entire education system, just to put it out there for you guys to think about, is premised on having the people providing the system with its instruction and education and learning working past any possible limit of normal work hours for people. And if you work in finance, you're making money hand over fist, that's great. But if you're a school teacher and just went into as a middle-class profession, as most people do, and push comes to shove, it's like, you need to work 12 hours a day to do what we want you to do. It's like, that's not sustainable. It's just, this is a larger conversation, I know, but that's kind of what it's based on. The things that are being asked of us can't be done in an 8 or even 9-hour day. It's a 10, 11, 12-hour day, plus weekends. You don't work on the weekends, you're absolutely screwed. So I'm just trying to give you that perspective, because I understand the frustration, but maybe it needs to fall on some kind of organizational rethinking at the DOE level for kids that are, you know, if they're out, who's going to support them? Is there centralized lessons they could do? I mean, it's not ideal, but I recognize how huge the problem is. I don't think this resolution begins to solve it.
I think the intent of this resolution is to not create to not create sort of two tracks for teachers. So like, teachers have the students in school and then they have the students out of school, and the students out of school get separate lesson plans and separate work, and the students that are in school get the in-school lessons. I think the point of this is to try to make it all one. That's the intention.
I saw it that way as well. I see it as something that should be easier for teachers. I think what they went through last semester was insane. You know, coming home with 2 different versions of the same class and then having to deal with both forms of it, teach it twice. I don't understand it. And I don't think it was a success. I think we all stood by hoping that we didn't know very much, and that we would have been happily surprised that it worked out. And I think what it did was it was a short change for everybody. And I have the same impression, Jeff. It's great hearing your experience and concerns, which, you know, we take very seriously. But I also experience this resolution as something that should be much more straightforward, much easier to incorporate, and something that, you know, could make it possible for those that are home to at least hear their teacher's voice, to feel as though they're in that classroom. And then, of course, they'll have to get some things delivered, you know, through Google Docs and whatever else, but they can still feel as though they're part of something. Because I think that's where the mental health started coming in, is these kids are just locked at home reading. And there's no intonation, there's no engagement, there's no enthusiasm, there's nothing. So even though it's not great in the classroom right now, anything's better than 3 kids sharing a bedroom, all lying on their bed, opening up docs. And so that, I think, you know, when this came through from Judith, that's how I received it anyway. And I just think it's you know, if the DOE comes back with something else that they think could be better, you know, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, and we're too aspirational, at least it won't be nothing. But I think the centralized idea, when you have rich curriculums like we do, isn't going to be possible. It's not like we're teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic and just one version of it. We have really progressive schools that have, Millennium being one of them. And, these kids are taking existential literature at one school and they're taking, the classics at another school. And it's going to be very hard to deliver something like that, I think, centrally.
I think the other thing, Trisha, I think that needs to be said is the idea of structure. So, I mean, I think, when you talk about the kids laying on the bed, pulling up Google Docs, like, number one, that's assuming that they were doing that and not just playing video games. But two, it's like, and we all saw this in the beginning of the pandemic, is that, the kids most of them didn't have a real schedule. And so they just kind of, I mean, I think Andrew mentioned at one of our meetings, play video games all day and then like 10, 11 o'clock, start cracking the books. So, I mean, I think the other thing that this is aimed at is let's try to give kids a normal school schedule if we can.
Right.
All right, so I'd like to apologize for kind of venting so much to you guys. It's just really like it's just dark times, so I apologize for that. For me, again, I think I've got to recuse anyway because I'm affected by this. Is that accurate?
Yes. So it's
So
absolutely.
I would say I respectfully would ask that we drop the reference to bars opening, and that we drop and beyond respectfully, I would ask about New York City schools remain closed or in hybrid status while many schools across the country will remain open. I don't think we should be second guessing the decision to prioritize the city's health. Our city's handled this health crisis far better than most places across the country in terms of trying to get the numbers down. We were hit the hardest of anywhere also. And I think second guessing it, and that one really is, to me, I'm not down with that. And I would just ask that you drop from the resolutions. I think you should drop the idea that we're being trained in simultaneous instruction. I think you should just be going for it. Classrooms are if you can get classrooms filmed and kids at home are getting files to look at that, that's going to be enough of a incredible, that's a lift right there to get the room. Who's going to videotape it? Who's going to download the file? Who's going to send it to the kid? Times 6 classes a day. I agree that would be great. I'm not opposed to that. I don't know what the union stance is on that, but me as just a regular teacher sitting in a classroom like I was today, I would be absolutely fine with there being a camera there. I mean, it's going to be weird because there's going to be times when we're not at the board and we're not always at the board, but if the kid feels like they're watching a 15-minute experience their classmates had, sometimes it's not very dynamic for them because kids are doing work when they're not. That's going to be understood, but I don't think we need to be trained in simultaneous instruction. I don't know what that would look like or how that would even happen. So I think that would be a great thing to drop because I don't know what it even means.
That came from a news article where some of the teachers were saying, well, we don't know how to do this, so we cannot. So that's why that's in there.
You're muted.
I say they just teach and someone films their class. I don't know what people have to be taught to do,
I don't know if managing the equipment or what, but that was one of the reasons why some of the teachers were saying it couldn't be done because they didn't know how to do it.
So you could add maybe when needed.
Maybe it's not trained teachers, but maybe call upon the DOE to have schools ready a plan for delivering simultaneous instruction. Like the plan's going to have to come from administration. Who films the class? Where do those files end up and who sends them? And just think how big that file is going to be. It's going to be a 50-minute file per class at my school of a rendered video that's going to be then attached to something to send to these kids. Maybe it's not about the teacher being trained, but about the school coming up with its plan for delivering these filmed classes to the students.
It's web-based. I mean, it's just like Google Docs. I mean, it's not going to be landing in anybody's box.
I mean, we could take, I mean, if we don't want, if people don't want the training in there, we can take that out. I don't feel that strongly about it.
I think it would just, if you say if needed, because then it makes it less daunting of a.
Okay, that makes sense.
Eric.
Yeah. I raised my hand probably about 10 minutes ago as you guys were going back and forth, and my point.
So sorry.
No, that's fine. My points were made. Like I understand Jeff's point because he's in the field, like he's dealing with the kids every day, so I get that. But when I read this, I read it as DOE. You got to come up with a plan that makes sense for a majority, not a minority, and that they're to do it, not the teachers are to do it. So I guess I get that. The only thing I disagree on here is the Wi-Fi, the last one. I have no idea how you're gonna DOE give everyone Wi-Fi. I just don't. I don't think that's up to us. If that's part of their plan, then fine. But I think that one's got to.
So Eric, the reason what we experienced last year was that when the DOE was able to identify that a family did not have Wi-Fi, Verizon stepped in and was able to connect a lot of these families. And so I'm assuming that's what you meant here, Judith?
Yeah, this is an important one because it primarily affects the lower income students.
Absolutely, it's important. Absolutely, 100%. You're gonna get different neighborhoods that don't have Wi-Fi. I just don't know how they're going to implement that and give everyone these Wi-Fi. I didn't know about Verizon. I have issues with Verizon, but there's other companies.
They did step in. We got a lot of kids connected. They're not everybody, but they did a fairly good job of getting to people.
Okay.
We actually one of the things we asked for in our resolution, or was it our resolution, maybe just discussion, was having places they could go to, like all these WeWorks that have closed, and having a proctor for some of these kids, because these spaces are all wired and they're private. And if they don't have the space at home, I don't think we need to be there anymore, but who knows? I was daunted at these data numbers of people, the cases. I was. And I think we would be smart to put something in place.
Okay.
Anybody else? And Jeff, I'm sorry, what was your other ask for Judith? Did she address all your asks?
Respectfully, I don't agree with all of Jeff's asks.
You can say that too.
I think again, I've sort of, I don't want to belabor the point. I've sort of I've said what I had to say about the liquor stores, bars, and restaurants. I mean, I think Jeff's example of grocery stores remaining open is kind of my point. That was a necessary service that needed to remain open. And to my mind, schools are right up there with grocery stores. I don't think that liquor stores, bars, and restaurants are there. I don't recall what I think there was one more point that Jeff made.
Other schools.
Yes, other schools, but I think that's really important because our kids are even more behind than other kids in this country, in the world. And like, forget about my kids not, taking the most advanced classes, or they're falling behind. But like, my friend told me that his child isn't reading. Like, this is such serious stuff. And, we have got to find a way to keep schools open. And like I said last time, I had some strong reservations about doing this resolution. Jeff, I think both you and I had sort of different reservations about doing this resolution, which is partly why I offered to write it, because like, I didn't want to sound like we were asking for remote learning. And that's why this is in here, because, we don't want remote learning. We want to have our kids be able to read and be able to keep up with their peers across the country and the world. So I do think that that's important to be in here.
You're second guessing the schools staying closed when I really just think you shouldn't, because that was a safety measure.
Yeah, no, I really am, because I think even when we prioritize teachers and school staff getting vaccines, but yet the schools still didn't open with masking and other. So yeah, I do question that. I really do.
Students weren't vaccinated in large numbers in the spring. Staff weren't required to be. until 2 weeks ago.
And
which
a
is
lot of
absurd.
students still aren't vaccinated.
And they still aren't required to be vaccinated. Why don't we ask for that?
We
this
did.
resolution?
Well, we did in the last one.
Okay.
We
Because
did.
that's something that we need. And
No,
would
I
just
agree
say,
with that.
I would just say, mine's a recusal, so I guess it counts as a no vote anyway. With all due respect to you, Judith, if these aren't taken out, I would encourage members of the board to vote against this because you're second guessing public health policy and you're not a public health policy expert. And it's just not your place to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but
I don't think
I'm
we
a
need to,
human.
yeah, I don't think we need to go back though, because, I'm of the opinion too, that before the vaccine came out, I was all for remote, even though it was awful. But now that the vaccines are out, I feel differently about it because we know masks and vaccines, greatly reduces risk. So, as long as we're not looking, I mean, we just can't go back. I mean, it's a new world now. So it should read like it's, I mean, we've asked for mandatory vaccines, and we're asking for masks and asking for it to be safe going forward. But we shouldn't belabor the pre-vaccine issues, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, I don't think this resolution does, but
I think that one whereas does. It definitely questions a public policy health decision when no one on this committee, as far as I know, is a public policy expert.
well, look, my point there was we cannot go back to remote learning, and I don't want to be in a situation where kids are home for 10 days or 20 days or 30 days and they don't have simultaneous learning because they're already really far behind. And that's the point of that being in there.
That doesn't read to me like that. That reads New York schools remained, past tense, closed or in a hybrid status, while many schools across the country and the world remained open. That's talking about last spring and summer. That's not talking about now or the future. It's second guessing a public policy decision made in the largest city in the country that was hit the hardest by a pandemic. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous to have this in here. And again, I would encourage people to vote against it.
That's the thing. You change the way it's written going forward. Now that we have vaccines and now that we know that masking works, we hope schools become a vital service like grocery stores. If or something like that, you change tense. To Jeff's point, I disagree with it because that is a tricky thing.
I mean, I don't want to say anything about hope or aspirational like that. I think is a big mistake because that makes it sound like it's an if. So, I mean, if I don't know if
Fair enough,
if others,
but there has to be
besides
something else. Yeah.
I mean,
maybe there's.
Is there anyone else?
Also, school should have been last venue closed and the first venue open. 1.1 million students go to schools, 12% of the population. You think that should have been the last venue
all right.
closed in the
Should
city?
we just? I'm sorry. Should we just table this? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I had mixed feelings about this to begin with. We're not. I knew this was gonna be an issue getting this passed. I mean, that was Wendy's point from last time, which I incorporated into this. If we don't want to do this resolution, let's not do it. But I don't want to go. I think we should call the question at this point.
Well, I mean, the process is that everybody gets to give feedback, and you as the author can either say that you're willing to make the accommodations or you aren't. And if you're done, then we move to voting. So we were just still in the discussion phase. And if anybody else has any feedback, it's those two items that Jeff has called to your attention, and it's totally fine, Judith, if you don't want to take them out. If anybody else has feedback on those, it would, that's different, please bring it forward, because when it comes to resolutions that the committee passes, we want everyone to feel as though they've fleshed it out. That's why we bring it to the committee meeting. So please, speak up if there is, if you have feelings about those two as well, and if you have any suggestions, and then Judith can entertain it or not.
Is there any good wordsmithers out there better than I am? There has to be something that we can soften a little bit, but still makes the point. Or not.
I think the word many just takes the focus off the more, the more assumptive. If you could say, many schools remained closed or in a hybrid status while liquor stores, bars and some, liquor stores, bars and restaurants remained open. It does reflect priorities. And I just think, again, that softening might help get it past the full board. Because I don't think you need it. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it has to be, that's just my opinion. And, many New York City schools remain closed or in a hybrid status while many schools across the country remained open. It makes it less assumptive, that's all. And, sometimes you have to be, if you need that whereas to create the resolution strength, that's one thing. I think here you have so many other whereases that do that. So that's
Well,
my feedback.
here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put the many before, while many New York City liquor stores, bars, and restaurants remain open. I put the many there. But it is a fact that New York City schools remain closed or in a hybrid status while many New York City liquor stores, bars, and restaurants remained open. That is a fact. I don't think I don't want to hide from the facts here. And we can see what if there's an issue at the full board meeting where people will have an opportunity to propose friendly amendments there as well.
Okay.
That may be a fact, but this is not a language of a fact. Schools should have been the last venue closed and the first venue open. That's not factual. That's an opinion, which is inappropriate probably in a whereas.
Where should?
Whereas schools should have been the last venue closed and the first venue opened. The third to last whereas on the first page. That's an opinion.
I don't see this.
Yeah, it's one,
The
two,
third to last
three,
one from the bottom of page 1.
I'm sorry, I still don't see that.
The third to last one from the bottom of page 1.
Mine says, whereas if middle and high school students are quarantined, live instruction is not required.
I think you're just in a different format. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 7th whereas.
All right, so there's a point there because we don't want to opinionize. I did not see that. So I think that, again, it's just assumptive. I think that, if you can get something in that language that can suggest that without making an opinion, that would be better, Judith, if you can. In a resolution. It's certainly fine as an opinion that informs the resolution. So, and I don't know if you even need that because we already have the suggestion here that is clearly where we stand.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially if you keep the things about the bars and the restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is quite powerful.
Okay, I can take that out.
All right, anyone else? Okay, great. I think we're ready.
Okay, I'm gonna send Jennifer, I just made those tweaks that we talked about. And I'm gonna send that to Jennifer, the tweaked one to Jennifer.
How did I mute myself? Sorry. Okay, so we are ready to vote. And Jen, if you can do a roll call.
Got it. Okay. If someone can call the question and someone else on the
Called
phone.
a question?
Second.
Thank you. Alrighty, do a roll call. Go ahead, start with Trisha,
Yes.
Jeff, recused, Sarah Castle, she's not here anymore. Actually, I have to recount and see if we have quorum. I think Sarah left. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have. Okay, I'll move along. Wendy?
Yes, and thanks for everybody's work.
Sarah just rejoined.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Moved her up again. Eris?
Yes.
Oh, was that Sarah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Okay.
Bethany. You know.
No, no worries. That happens. Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Kenny?
Yes.
Okay. Judith?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew's not here. Sarah A's not here. Alrighty, with all the votes in and with the tweaks made, the motion passes for this resolution.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Judith. And thanks, everybody, for hanging in there with that. All right, moving along to our last item is the safe school bus loading. At Edgar Street, I reached out to Betty Kay. The last information she has is that they are now focusing on the corner of Trinity Place and Edgar Street on the park side, if you will, and letting kids off at which, you know, is good news because it could not be done unless they are following through with their commitment to closing that westbound lane of Edgar Street. So I'm supposed to be getting more information, but it looks as though it won't be on Greenwich Street because of how narrow the street is, and that they are now focusing on Edgar Street before it hits Trinity Place. Then the kids will get off. They'll be right on that widened plaza at the corner where they go into school. And they won't, in some ways it's good they don't have to walk across from Greenwich Street. They'll be in front of the school at that corner. I still don't know how they're going to do that if they have, you know, other traffic coming across there, but I suppose we'd have the same problem on Greenwich Street. So that's my update there. Does anybody have any questions? Does it make sense where I'm telling you that is?
That's good. Is there any word about widening, you know, and closing the street? And, you know, so is that can we ask that question?
I'm definitely going to ask that question. I've requested a meeting actually. So she's just going to get me updates on schedule this week. And then we've put in a request. I told Tammy today that I'd like to have at least a joint meeting. I'd like the committee to be on this. You know, it's fine to have these meetings that we have, but I would like the committee, which is really why I liked having this at the youth committee. These discussions, I understand why they needed to move them to transportation, but it does, you know, it's something this committee worked really hard on, and I want everyone to be part of those discussions. So I'm really hoping that we can have an upcoming joint meeting next month.
And are you copying Kelly McGuire on any and all of these things? You know, and obviously the new principal as well, who I forget his name for PS 150. It'd be nice for us to introduce ourselves to this new principal. I just saw that in the press.
Yes. You know, I think that next month will be better for him because he's been so crazy.
Yeah.
Heard from everybody that he's a little oversubscribed. So I would like to invite him next month if he's able to come. And we really are getting close now. They should be in the planning stages of this street. And I went by there and it has not begun, and it concerned me. It's going to take a while to do what they're doing. And the reason for the widening is the mechanicals. That's how we got this so easily, as you'll recall, is that the building owner, to do what he wants to do upstairs, has to push out into the street 10 feet. And I didn't see any activity there. So it concerned me. And that's why I'm asking for at least a small update this week and then an imminent meeting. So hopefully we'll get that to happen in November. I did see that, and it's ironic, we have a company working in our building here. It's the same demo company that did the Dickey building demo. So I had this nice opportunity in my own home to talk to someone about how that project went. And they said one of the most challenging ones they've had, because they didn't save any of the insides. And they had to put this steel grid around the entire circumference of that Dickey building facade to be able to empty it and now reconstruct it. It's fascinating if you have a chance to go by there to actually see it. So anyway, so that's all been taken apart, and now they're in the process of building that, and which in some ways was good news, because the play space is going to be on the top of it, and it's nice to know that the whole inside is going to be brand new. They are literally just keeping the bricks of the facade. Nothing else is remaining of that building, which is sad in some ways, but considering it'll be a school, it'll be safer.
Tricia,
So,
this is Rosa. Can I just jump on your comment about it would be
Sure.
lovely for us to swing by and take a look, because I really need your help getting our principal inside the building. Like, the SCA is not budging at all,
Oh.
and being incredibly unreasonable about not letting the DOE, who is actually the end user and owner of the space, in to actually look at their work.
I just got off this call about the Harbor School pool that I did not put on the agenda because I have some work to do before I bring it to everybody next month. But I will share this one piece of it. Andrea Bender, who's our new contact there, said to me, because we asked that the Harbor School aquatics department spoke directly to the architect. They have some really complicated things, like, the surface has to be able to take 300 pounds. They can't have tile because the tile breaks because of the equipment. There are special inputs. There has to be a way of getting people in and out of the water. They have to have a special head clearance at one end. Storage has to look like this. And so Cass Sternberg, the PTA president, and the principal who were on the call said, we'd like to have a meeting with the architect. And she goes, we don't permit it. We pass the messages along for you and create the communication stream. And when they asked why, the only answer we got is that it has always been their process. They feel as though it's important to maintain those boundaries, and that they've never had any issues.
That's such bullshit.
And I
I'm
said,
sorry.
it's
So much Wendy for
276.
saying that.
You never contacted the principal before you built that school. And as a result, you wasted over 5,000 square feet of rooms that were the wrong size. You were not here then, Andrea, but I was. And they have a classroom that you mistakenly built a music room in and assumed everybody's instruments would be on their laps. That was a big mistake, and they can't use that room. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. The information it's a game of telephone. It is not efficient communication, and the process takes twice as long as a result. So I asked them if they would go back and see if they could facilitate exceptions to be able to have this direct communication. But that is why I was told today that they have forbid having people have contact. But it's a great time until we can see if we're successful in facilitating that direct conversation, communication. Because today she committed to taking an email with all of the questions that anybody has about sizes, about placement, about plans, about ceiling heights, about questions they have, photographs. They have to give them the experience that they're literally standing in the space if they're not going to let them stand in the space. And they committed to that in the phone call today. So my suggestion is get busy with all those demands and put the SCA to work so that they're begging you to come to the building. And I think that's what we should be focused on, because we gave her a list today it's going to be so much more work to patch that communication than it would be just to have them speak. So in the short term, try that and know that I'll be advocating for getting the principal into the building.
Okay, thank you so much. I
Well,
really appreciate it.
Tricia, this is when Buxton and I were doing Build Schools Now, I think this is a decade ago now, or pretty close to it. We called for an audit of the whole school construction process. Just because parents were spending hours and hours, trying to just be the go-between between the school and how it got built and the elected officials and just the community board, just what we're talking about right now. And it's a terrible game of telephone. And
Yes.
we asked Scott Stringer at the time to do an audit of the whole process of how schools get built. And no, but the elected officials don't want to touch this for whatever reason. But I feel like this is a very big citywide call to arms to say, how do schools get built? Why do they take so long? Why, when they open, do principals have to then go in and find out that the corners of their front door, that there's such a dangerous corner right on their front of their building that Maggie had to put pool noodles with duct tape on those spaces the day she opened the school? There's just such stupid stuff everywhere. And for them to even say for a second that there's no issues, I mean,
There
I've brought up issues, the
there's
whole thing.
issues
I'm
of
just so
in the school.
offended. And if we are the best, everyone says that downtown we get the best and everyone's jealous of us. God help the rest of the neighborhoods and other places. I think that we need to have a whole call to arms. The school construction authority and the architects that service them and the builders that do it. I feel like the whole process is severely broken and lots of insiders and lots of old ways of doing things. And it's really, really broken. And
It is.
I'm the first one to say, I think we need to do an audit of the whole thing and really go after people with the arrogance. I mean, my blood is boiling right now because I spent so much time lining up the Pratt School of Architecture to come in. Remember that? That was parents that spent, hours and hours to get experts. So we actually got the experts to come in and say, here's what's possible. And then they wouldn't even come and, see the presentation. I mean, the school construction authority, I mean, I honestly will just say they are bad. They are really bad. Their process is bad. Everything is bad. And I think we should blow it up, and it starts with an audit. And if there's any way that, and the elected officials don't want to touch this. I
No,
mean,
they
that's the other thing.
Margaret's team was on the call today and they are touching it. I mean, it's reached epic proportions because it also costs them more. And I actually, when she brought up, we don't have the money to do it that way, she said, this money is tied to seats. I said, that's actually not true. The 10 million is free and clear. You have a very small amount of money that's tied to seats. The 10 million is not. We have architects that said they could build it for a lot less than that. And over again, you won't even speak to them. So you want to complain about money, but then you hire two architects because they're the only ones you've vetted. Neither one of them has worked on a historic building, and you're talking about internal demolition. The company that you wouldn't talk to is the only one who did. None of this makes any sense. And so
that's right. And parents at PS 150, oh, by the way, that were from Shop Architect, which is one of the best architecture firms in the whole country. We just happened by dumb luck to have parents that were like the cutting edge, best and brightest of New York City, and quite frankly, of the world, that were just saying, this process makes no sense to us. We don't understand how this works. This isn't just, PTA moms complaining. These are the best architects in the world looking at the school construction authority process and saying, God, this is insane. And that's why we got people to come together and work on this stuff, because it was just so crazy. And it doesn't sound like it's any better now.
Well, it's not, because they're not open to hearing from families. They're not open to hearing from parents who are architects, and they're not interested in a direct line of communication. And I think that, we are getting help from the elected officials with this now because it has reached such epic proportions. I do
And
think
it needs an audit. An audit needs to be asked for, a whole audit of the whole process. And that is going to make people uncomfortable. How much money? How long? What is the process? What are the, the flow chart? the flow chart of how do you engage the public? How do you engage principals? How do you, that whole flow chart has to be redone entirely.
There's probably an agency that this could be reported to, like Department of Investigation.
Well, I mean, it's a comptroller, you know, really, Scott Stringer said he was going to do this and he just never did. But that was one of the things he was going to do when he took office as the
Well, no, we asked him to do an audit, and he said that that was, I mean, at least he told Build Schools Now that, you know, he thought that that was not the way to handle it, because he thought he could do it just by, you know, whatever, I don't know. But I think it needs to be something more aggressive now, to say, you know, a whole audit needs to be, you know, just like how in the environmental committee, when we're talking about the, you know, what's the process of the, you know, the 250 Water Street process, that, you know, there's a flow chart about, like, you know, this is what happens, and this is when there's public engagement, and this is what has to happen next. I mean, there needs to be a flow chart if a school is being built, like, you know, what happens, and when do principals get to talk to the architects, and how, you know, how do they engage the public? I mean, when you build a school, why can't this be collaborative? I mean, I just don't, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think
then they have to share their cards, and they don't want to. They want these things. They want to do as they please. And
well, I understand that, but I think we have a lot of examples about why it doesn't work.
Yes, and that's true. And their flow chart, really honestly, from my experience on this one, is that they do not consult with anybody. They deliver you a finished product. They block all input from any party that is not within the SCA, including the DOE, who is theoretically their client. And the DOE is actually they're not fighting back. And let's put it that way. And so basically
I went to a lot of meetings. Yeah, I went to a lot of meetings, and Trisha, you did too. And I have to say, I was so angry every single time I walked out of that. There'd be a whole bunch of those giant guys sitting in the back of the room from the school construction authority that never said a word, that, you know, were so intimidating. And then, you know, poor Mike was out up at the front, the one spokesperson that's trying to smooth everything over, whose job is just to stand on the firing lines from all the angry parents. That is just an unacceptable answer. You know, you just, I mean, you know, you can't pay that person enough.
It's an outdated model. It's an outdated model. It operates, she told me today, it operates like a city agency, and it really just needs to be dismantled. And I think that if it is, it's going to be a lot more competitive. They also, you know, I remember the 234 walkway, you know, Lisa Rippinger,
exactly,
private person bid that, and it was $25,000, and it cost $800,000 for the SCA to build that stupid thing. And
exactly.
It's not even heated.
They're dirty. It's a dirty process.
It's a dirty process. And we also, if it's come that we don't have room for gyms and we can't afford this and that, it's a perfect time to be talking about, you know, reorganizing this. And because the waste is just so palpable. And I think we have the context now to really dig into that. And so thank you, Wendy, because I do think we should put that on an upcoming agenda. And it's while I'm in these conversations about Harbor School and 150, it's great timing because we're in very close touch with them. So I'll see what we can get initiated there.
Well, and you know, think about how much time and energy we put proving every single point that they keep throwing up wrong. And yes. I don't understand the self-righteousness anymore. It just needs to be, you know, it just needs to be ended.
Exactly.
Thank you. Sorry for the soapbox.
So it's all right. It's good to talk about so that we can pull that together. I think it is a good time. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. Yes, someone needs something?
Yeah, this is Jennifer. Would you want to go visit the budget request for this meeting?
I asked Lucian for clarification on that today, and he didn't give me any. So I don't know what that item is.
Well, essentially, it's a recap. Well, the same process as how it went last year for October and November meetings. So during this time of the year, the city requests that community boards for each committee. So, for example, Landmarks and Preservation Committee has their own sort of requests. Of course, in nature would be different than requests coming from youth and education. So if members from this committee If they have any ideas that they have in mind related to youth and education, such as extra staffing, new pending legislation that they would like to formulate as a request, and in that request would be entered into a sort of query.
We do this every year and then they ignore it every year. I hate to be such a Debbie Downer, but it seems like a futile exercise. This is terrible coming from your chair, but it's important to just say it like it is. We always say reduce class size. We always say more funding outside of capital funds so that we can build more infrastructure in our schools. We have 3 gyms instead of 12. I can make this list up based on last year's, Jen. I don't have to drag the whole committee through it. But I have to say, it's discouraging to continue to be asked for that exercise and never have one thing materialize. And I think I might make that one of the points of when I submit it, because this committee has given so much of their time thoughtfully coming up with those items every single year. And I don't think I'm going to put them through it right now. So unless anybody has a new one, if anyone has a new one for this year, I'm happy to take it back.
But
But
maybe it's this new process, this new blueprint, I don't know what we're going to call that, but this new flow chart of being more collaborative in terms of, school spaces and architects and the school construction authority.
well,
Maybe.
I suppose that costs money to do. Why not? We'll put that
Yeah.
in the budget ask.
Trisha, if you'd like, I can quickly share my screen. We have a sort of summary we worked on from last year.
Okay.
I'll share my screen actually right now. Does everyone see my screen?
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, so these were the sort of asks that were made as requests.
So I'm just going to work my way down. Can you start at the top?
Sure.
Millennium High School is not on schedule, but it was a pandemic. We'll give them a break. Trinity Place School, that did stay on schedule so far. So that's good. Freestanding gym, that did not happen. Field space has not happened. We did not see the results for after school. Millennium High School, yes, so Millennium did get their 14th floor, it just isn't built yet. SCA, can you go down a little further to renovate?
Relocation one's not about Millennium. It's about to provide a new or expand an existing high school. It's not about this physical plan.
Well, it's about, it began because they denied Millennium expansion. So we wanted to expand a screen high school or build a new one, yes.
But Millennium's not expanding.
No, they aren't, but that was an option that we put on the table.
Well, we deliberately wrote not to do that.
Well, at the time, I'm not sure.
Millennium's expanding physically to accommodate for how overcrowded it is. This is saying get a new school.
Yeah, this one, I thought we said that, we just referenced to the fact that they denied them then. And as a result, we are looking for a new high school.
Yeah,
seat.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So
Because
in other words, we haven't done this. We haven't found a new school or located a new school in Lower Manhattan.
you are correct.
That's all.
We did get the 14th floor expansion, which came first, which is why we didn't ask for the SCA to renovate interior and repair elevators at 75 Broad. They have not done that either. Is that it?
That was it. And then we always start off with sort of intro as to the sort of community district needs, and then we get into specifics leading up to the asks/requests. It's a 2-pager.
Okay, so I can update that offline, Jen. Like I said, it's going to all be repeats except for this new audit.
So- Hey, Trisha, one thing is that the elementary schools are under enrolled because of pandemic, things, people moving out and everything else like that. Do we want to ask for money to make schools whole?
That wouldn't come out of this bucket.
Okay.
I do think that's a resolution, though. you know, is that students or schools won't go into debt because of it. You know, I'll double check it before I write it, but I think I'm pretty sure that's a different bucket. But that's a good point, and I'll run it past Tammy.
I don't think I did see reduced class sizes in here.
No, we don't, because they have said they're not going to do it. So at this point, they have shoved it off onto the federal government. And we did get the C4E funds, and we did an audit on that, and it boiled down to $52,000 per school. It was a lot of money. And at our school, I shouldn't say per school, at 234, it was $52,000, which isn't even a teacher. So they are not committing to reducing class size in the state of New York. They have made that clear. So I could ask for it again, but if the federal government couldn't come up with it in the C4E funds that was supposed to be, you know, the holy grail, then they were not going to commit to that.
I still think it's worth asking, even if it's going to be a no.
Okay, we can put that in there. It was in for like 8 years. So we're adding the audit. We're putting back in the class size. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
Maybe that class size request, it's tied into the because of pandemic, class sizes go up and down, and so you fund the classroom teacher, you know, not just per. I mean, it's not going to happen, but you know, the idea is that you can ask to fund the class, even if
Right.
you know it's under enrolled because of pandemic issues.
Well, that's interesting, actually, because that would fall under this bucket, Wendy. And that certainly would be something new. We'd have this opportunity at the pandemic.
Well, and oh, by the way, you know, I think to the point of funding cameras to fund the classroom so that every lesson can be recorded. I mean, we all know it's going to be on your computer or something like that, but you know.
I was going to say, do we really think they're going to install camera systems in each of these classrooms across the city? I was thinking this would be simpler technology in terms.
But just think what they just did for the community board with that new camera. What do we call that? Where it turns to you, and you know what, the meeting that we went to, the one live meeting we went to in Gail Brewer's office, where camera looks at you when you speak up.
Yes, but I mean,
I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but I'm like, you know, if we're doing that on city government, that's all I'm saying.
it's just the thought of that in all the classrooms across the city. Do we want to have our ask be, you know, do we want that to be part of
This is aspirational, to your point.
Okay. I'll put it in.
Well, if everybody else disagrees, then I'm happy to say no, but to your point, they ignore it. So
I don't think it's going to happen if we don't have the technology be simpler. That's my thought. But I can certainly put it in.
now that Amazon has those little robots, everybody will send their little robot to school. Anyway, I'm just being sarcastic. I'll stop now.
All right. Anyone else for this list? Okay. Thank you guys very much. I'll pull it together and get it to the office. All right. Unless anyone has any other comments.
Thanks, Trisha, and everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care. Have a good night.
You all, good night.
Night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.